When an engineer builds a bridge, they're calculating tension, right? They're measuring weight, factoring in wind resistance. It's a structure that is fundamentally meant to connect two separate points.
Oh, exactly. It's about connection.
Right. But what happens if the people you built that bridge for decide to, march an invading army across it? Or worse, what if they dismantle the bridge entirely and use that steel to build a cage?
Yeah, that tension right there between creation and application, that's really the beating heart of our deep dive today.
It totally is. And we are looking at a massive stack of sources for you today. We've got historical timelines like the Visceral Code timeline, some really intense character dossiers from the Mayday characters files, and these incredibly detailed narrative accounts.
Including that central text, the Visceral Code.
Right, the Visceral Code. All of this originates from a place known as the Commonwealth of Zakharov. And our mission today is to unpack this profoundly heartbreaking intersection of technological innovation, political upheaval, and a father's literally destructive obsession.
Yeah, to even comprehend how a single father's grief could eventually spark a continent-wide revolution, you first have to look at the pressure cooker he was living in. Because Zakharov wasn't just another society.
No, not at all.
It was this place where rapid, gleaming technological advancement was just inextricably linked to the iron-fisted rule of a governing body called the Combine.
Gleaming on the outside, maybe? Because the dossiers describe this really jarring juxtaposition. You have low-emission freight trains and AI-driven healthcare existing right alongside extreme state surveillance.
Right.
And just a terrifying loss of personal autonomy for you as a citizen.
Yeah, it was an environment where every convenience came at the cost of freedom. And right at the center of this world was a man named James Alexander Becker. He was the brilliant architect of the Mayday railway system.
But his railway isn't what doomed Zakharov, right?
No, actually. To understand the rebellion, and especially that incredibly complex dynamic between James and his daughter, we have to examine the technology that manipulated an entire population first.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mechanics of that technology are wild. According to the timeline, James created what was known as Visceral Code 1 in 2033.
Right.
And the documents state his original intention was radical peacemaking. But his method, he wanted people to physically feel what dying felt like.
Yeah, I know it sounds intense. He envisioned it as the ultimate deterrent, basically built entirely on forced empathy.
Forced empathy.
Exactly. The underlying logic was, if your nervous system could literally process the ultimate consequence of violence, like if you could visceralize the agony of death without actually dying, you would theoretically be incapable of inflicting that pain on another human being.
Hold on. Enforcing world peace by forcing citizens to simulate the pain of death, that sounds less like an empathy machine and more like, a psychological torture device just waiting to be abused.
And human nature responded exactly as you'd expect, right? Within 3 years, so by 2036, the code was completely weaponized.
Of course it was.
Instead of a universal deterrent, the state used it as a tool for terror. So the citizens of Zakharov didn't see James as this visionary who wanted to end conflict. They saw the architect of their waking nightmares.
Wow. And that public resentment leaves James dangerously vulnerable, which opens the door for a younger engineer named Edgar Hacksaw to hijack the entire project.
He really did.
The documents say Edgar sacrificed his own physical body to create something called the quantum soul in 2052. But how does that actually work? The sources mention he visceral coded the Commonwealth leaders.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a biological virus, like a microchip?
Think of it more as a biometric dead man switch. It was deeply embedded into the nervous system and tied to the city's infrastructure.
Okay.
So Edgar took James's original code and inverted it. Quantum soul required a constant tether to life, specifically the lives of the governing tyrants. Edgar physically and digitally linked the biometric signals of himself and the Commonwealth leaders to the broader biological grid of Zakharov.
So James basically invented the ultimate empathy machine, hoping to end conflict, but Edgar turned it into a digital dead man switch to hold an entire society hostage.
Precisely. If a citizen or a rebel managed to assassinate one of those leaders, their death triggered a deadly cascading impact across the entire population.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a failsafe that just erased free will. Edgar made it physically impossible to overthrow the government without indiscriminately destroying everyday citizens.
And he won an award for this, right?
Right. He used this twisted stability to win the Antonov Prize for Peace and officially formed the Combine, presenting it as the ultimate solution to all of Zakharov's problems.
Imagine living in that kind of invisible prison. Your revolution is neutralized before it even begins because killing your captor kills the hostage.
It's horrific.
But this massive political nightmare gets incredibly personal for James well before Edgar even takes over. Back in 2037, that public resentment over his original Visceral Code boils over. An angry mob attacks him. And they miss James, but they end up killing his 17-year-old daughter. The texts refer to her interchangeably as Vivienne or Denise.
Yeah, the historical accounts describe her as brilliant, an old soul. And her death just completely shatters James.
I mean, how could it not?
Right. The great architect of Zakharov just vanishes. For 15 years, he lives in a soot-stained alley down in a city called Metro. He's just quietly fixing radios and pressure valves with his apprentice, Nicole Mackey.
But Edgar doesn't just let his idol fade into obscurity. The dossier on Edgar reveals a terrifying level of obsession. I mean, he actually digs up Vivienne's grave.
Yes. He engraves her to apply that quantum soul technology. But, you can't simply plug a deceased body into a digital system and expect it to wake up.
Right, that's not how biology works.
Exactly. The medical horror of what Edgar did is just staggering. He lobotomizes her original consciousness. He essentially scoops out the essence of what made Vivienne human, leaving behind this empty biological vessel.
That is so dark.
It is. Then, using preserved bioimprints and advanced neuromapping, he engineers a perfect replica of her personality.
Yeah.
Only this version is highly compliant and entirely stripped of her original autonomy.
And he rebrands this engineered shell as Milena Marie Bruder, and she becomes a political prodigy. She's out there implementing AI healthcare and green tech, eventually rising to become the president of Zakharov.
The perfect puppet.
Exactly. She is the smiling, seemingly benevolent face of Edgar's totalitarian regime. And here's where it gets really interesting. Let's pause and really look at James in this moment.
Yeah.
He's been hiding in Metro for a decade and a half. One day, he's watching a televised National Assembly. And there, on the screen, is his dead daughter.
Working for the tyrants.
Just casually on TV.
Right. The narrative texts note that he didn't even feel the coffee cup shatter in his own hand. I mean, how does a parent process that?
The psychological break there is almost impossible to quantify.
The vast municipality of Zakharov, the only place to live in. You will have all the amenities as a resident scientist do. Small spaces to accommodate yourselves in, artificially produced meats, safety drones operating 24/7 inside your walls, and even an indoor playground for the little ones. Always remember, Zakharov municipality is the last place left to live for.
To see the child you buried not just walking around, but weaponized as the ultimate propaganda tool for the regime that ruined your life's work.
It is that precise, shattered coffee cup moment that drags Jones out of hiding.
But here is where James's morality goes completely off the rails. He starts a revolution, publicly called the Prime Movers Rebellion.
Right.
He recruits these mythic figures from his past. There's Wayward Mulligan, described as a demolitionist with poetry for lungs, Marianne Crowler, a codebreaker turned saboteur, and Spencer Edbrook, this stoic tactician.
Legends in their own right.
Yeah. And to the citizens of Zakharov, this looks like a desperate, righteous uprising to dismantle the surveillance state and restore actual democracy.
And they utilize the Mayday Railway, James's own creation, turning the freight trains into a sort of serpent of resistance against the Combine.
Right.
But James's apprentice, Nicole Mackey, is the one who notices the massive cracks in the facade. After a series of brutal battles where their allies are dying, she realizes the military strategy doesn't actually make any sense. It's erratic.
Because it isn't a military strategy at all. Nicole finds a hidden drawer in James's quarters. It's not filled with revolutionary schematics. It's old analog blueprints pressed against news clippings of Vivian's accident.
Yeah, alongside stills from that assembly footage with the name Melina Bruder circled in graphite.
Right. She cross-references the mission logs and makes this chilling discovery. Every single strike, every escalation was just a convoluted path designed to reach the Combine archive where Melina was stationed.
It was all a front.
Yes. James hijacked a genuine democratic movement to fund a heavily armed personal rescue mission.
And the collateral damage of that secret is just astounding. People who believed they were fighting for the liberation of were essentially cannon fodder for a father's delusion.
That's awful.
Wayward Mulligan dies holding a line during a coup. And the most horrifying example of James's ruthless tunnel vision involves Irina Prowler.
Wait, the text says Irina was abducted by the Combine, and instead of risking a rescue mission that might slow him down, James lobotomizes her. He lobotomized his own ally.
He remotely erased her memories. He knew that if the Combine interrogated her, she might compromise his hidden path to Melina.
Wow.
He prioritized his personal agenda over her mind, her life, and the broader revolution. Spencer Edbrock discovers this and rebels against James to try and save Irina anyway.
So what does this all mean? I have to push back on James here. When Nicole finally confronts him with all this evidence, he doesn't even try to deny it.
He embraces it.
Right. His actual defense to her is, I was willing to burn the tracks if it meant finding her heartbeat again. I mean, is there any universe where sacrificing genuine freedom fighters for the hypothetical rescue of one person, especially an engineered replica running on hijacked code, is justified?
From an ethical standpoint, it's indefensible. James treated his allies the exact same way Edgar treated the citizens of Zakharov, as disposable tools to achieve a grand vision.
That's a great point.
Nicole realizes the depth of his delusion. She tells him point blank that the woman in the tower is not Vivian, and she just walks away, leaving him entirely isolated.
And that isolation forces a massive crisis of conscience. James finds himself riding the empty night rails of the Mayday train, specifically sitting in the unfinished ninth car.
Right, the text refers to it as a symbolic ghost.
He's surrounded by the memory of all he built and all he destroyed.
And it's here, in the dark, that the memory of the original accident finally grounds him. He remembers the visceral, cruel imagery of the blood on the tarmac when Vivian died.
It snaps him back to reality.
He accepts the finality of her death and realizes he has to choose the living citizens of Zakharov over his own ghosts.
So he finally commits to the actual revolution. He rallies the remnants of the prime movers and teams up with a ferocious militia called Ferrata.
Led by Gustav Brutland.
Exactly. A former Combine captain who operates under something called the Fenrir Doctrine, which is this radical mythic philosophy of entirely tearing down centralized power.
It's intense.
Gustav and James form an unstoppable force, and they storm the Combine's hub, this massive glass and gold temple of lies.
The climax in the archives is an exhausting, brutal shootout that ends with James cornering the architect of Zakharov's misery, Edgar Hacksaw.
Right.
But Edgar's justification is just as twisted as James's obsession. Edgar genuinely believed he was protecting the future. He reveals that watching James fall apart after Vivian's death is what broke him.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He vowed to make Zakharov untouchable. He erased free will to ensure a tragedy like that could never happen again.
That is so messed up. Edgar points to the screens showing Melina and tells James she was meant to be a gift.
Right.
He actually thought giving James a lobotomized, programmed replica of his daughter, seated at the head of a totalitarian empire, was a tribute to his idol. That is sickening.
It is, but it perfectly synthesizes the core tragedy of both men. Edgar believed he was saving humanity by removing its capacity for pain, while James was willing to burn humanity to the ground to undo his own pain.
Right, two sides of the same coin.
Edgar even reminds James of the dead man's switch in that moment, confirming that killing him will trigger those massive ramifications across the city. He hands James one last thing: a small data drive.
The drive.
He confesses that the drive contains an algorithm that will unlock Melina's original memories. Vivian's true consciousness, but only for exactly 2 weeks before the code irreversibly corrupts.
Gosh.
He says, if we both had done things right from the start, I bet we could have brought her back for good.
The absolute tragedy of that moment. So James and Nicole managed to bypass the digital chains on Melina's mind, and for 14 days the algorithm holds.
Yeah.
She is Vivian again. She looks at him and calls him Dad, and then on a quiet hill in Valem, watching the sky beside the old westbound rail, she passes away peacefully.
The aftermath is a quiet ending to a very loud revolution. The totalitarian government dissolves. James is offered political power, but he refuses any title.
Which makes sense for him.
Yeah, he and Nicole return to what they do best, fixing things. They begin to rebuild the Mayday Railway. And more importantly, they start the slow, grueling process of rebuilding the trust of the people.
The Mayday train runs again, but this time it's etched with the physical scars of the rebellion. If you step back and look at this entire world, it's a terrifying warning. We see exactly how technology, even technology explicitly designed to foster connection and extreme empathy, can be seamlessly hijacked and weaponized by those in power.
Definitely. It also demonstrates how profound, unprocessed grief can distort even the most brilliant, rational minds.
Right.
James Becker was a genius, but his pain turned him into a manipulator who nearly doomed an entire continent. It is a brutal reminder of why critical thinking and demanding absolute transparency in both our leadership and our own personal motives is absolutely vital.
That brings me back to a detail from the very end of the narrative text. On the side of the Mayday train, on car 50549, someone scrawled a piece of graffiti in white chalk.
Oh, yeah.
It reads, "The code was never digital or gray. It was empathy. It was beautiful."
A really poignant reminder of the original bridge James tried to build before the world dismantled.
It is. But it also leaves me with a final, lingering question that keeps gnawing at me. We know Eddard used bioimprints and neuromapping to engineer Melina's shell.
Right.
And we know that Final Data Drive flawlessly restored Vivianne's original memories and personality for 2 weeks. If an algorithm can perfectly replicate a human being's memories, their quirks, their capacity to look at a man and genuinely call him dad, at what point does a programmed replica actually become a soul?
Wow.
Where exactly do the data points end, and where does humanity begin? We'll leave you to chew on that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.